This kid can turn himself invisible. Watch this. He can do it now.
I can't do it on command.
He can't do it on command.
On paper, a strong and capable hero should never get old. But in practice, they kinda do. Which is exactly why I consider the most timeless type of hero to actually be the idiot. The more I try to study storytelling, the more I learn that, at least in the West, it's all about the protagonist. More than the what, audiences care about the who. So to try and bring my 2 cents to the discourse, I created a simple chart to hopefully help examine what makes an effective protagonist, well, effective. Ultimately, I think it all boils down to 3 traits. The first is resolve, which is an unwavering drive toward a goal or belief. The second is influence, which comes in the form of title or charisma and is used to attract and persuade the characters around them. Lastly, competence, the distinct capability to solve the problems that the story presents. Using this overly confusing ternary plot I made, we can visualize a character's composition of these 3 traits. Since characters tend to change over time, we can just pinpoint where a character begins their story and track where they go by the end. In my past 3 videos, I've come to the conclusion that the most effective protagonists will reach a balance across all 3 traits, giving them the widest toolset to move the story forward. So when we find that a character lacks a specific trait, it usually indicates to us that the story will be about them learning to harness it. In today's video, I found an archetype of characters who start with influence and resolve, but initially lack competence, and must build it up throughout the course of their story. I'm calling them prophets because it starts with a P and so do the other 2 categories. So let's jump right in and see what it is that makes this archetype such a timeless tool for storytelling. The first step in creating an idiot hero is creating an idiot. For the examples in today's video, I'll be going over Fu Panda, Into the Spiderverse, and the Lego Movie. Meaning our idiots are Po Ping, Miles Morales, and Emmett Brakowski. Calling these guys idiots is pretty harsh. They're more like fish out of water, so to say. As we're gonna soon see, incompetence comes in many shapes and sizes, so for each story, I'll be sure to clarify just what I mean by it. First off, Po, the panda with dreams of serving kick-ass rather than noodles. In Kung Fu Panda, believe it or not, competence comes in the form of Kung Fu. Focus, stamina, dexterity, and grace are all things that make a talented fighter, and they're all antonyms of what it means to be Po. He leaves a messy trail of failure everywhere he goes, and that's before he even throws his first punch. Is he good at some things? For sure, he's an expert chef. But like I said, in his universe, if you can't fight, you can't win. Love the guy, but in the context of his environment, Po is an idiot. What about Miles Morales? Isn't he like an academic wizard who gets into a prestigious middle school and aces his exams? Not to mention he has literal superpowers? Fair points, yes, but I'm going to move the goalposts a little bit. Because remember, competence is relative. In the Spider-Verse, literally everyone gets good grades and has superpowers. That's the barrier of entry, the bare minimum. To be competent in the Spider-Verse, you have to know how to fully harness your powers. At the very least, you should be able to use them on command. But at the start of Miles' story, he couldn't be further from this, making even Miles Morales an idiot. When looking for incompetent protagonists though, you really can't get much more accurate than the Lego Movie's Emmett Brakowski. In the Lego Movie, competence comes in the form of creativity. The more original the builder, the more competent the character. With Emmett, unless he's given concrete instructions, he is completely incapable of building anything at all. And let alone building, he can barely form original thoughts. For all intents and purposes, he is the single least creative character in his entire universe. And in the Lego Movie, you can't get much more incompetent than that. An idiot to out-idiot all idiots. So step 1 is complete for all 3 movies. We've determined what competence looks like, and in turn, what it does not. But we have to make sure these incompetent characters are still worth following. Remember, they're not just idiot characters, they're idiot heroes. So let's make them worthy of being the lead by establishing some influence and resolve. The easiest way to make a character worth following is to give them some degree of influence, either externally in the form of a title, or internally in the form of charisma. Regardless of form, they'll be able to attract and persuade the characters around them by naturally putting them in the center of the story. Since making this chart, I've been calling influence a cheat code, and I still stand by that. For example, let's look at Emmett again. The most significant thing about him is his insignificance. He is as bland and stale and unoriginal as a character could possibly be, but by understanding influence, we can turn a nobody into a somebody with just a single scene. While I think Emmett's a likable enough guy, none of the other characters in his story agree. Clearly, charisma isn't an option, so to give Emmett influence, we have to give him a title. How about the Special? Yeah, by slapping on the piece of resistance to him, we have suddenly turned the most mundane character into the keystone of a revolution. Now that sounds a little more like a hero, right? But if we stop there, Emmett would be nothing more than a glorified mule. The story would only move as far forward as the other characters could drag him, making him more of a hindrance than a hero. This is where resolve comes in. Emmett needs to want something so badly that he becomes a driver in the story, not just the cargo. So when he's presented with the opportunity to be somebody who is special to someone, it's enough to get him on board with this journey, even if he's in way over his head. Still an idiot, yes, but now an idiot we can get behind. On a near identical note, we can do the exact same thing with Poe. Now, Poe definitely has a lot more character to him than Emmett does, but being fun to be around isn't really a top priority when the impending threat of Tai Lung looms over all of China. All this is to say, Poe will need a title greater than just Noodle Boy to have a role in this story. To go from zero to hero, let's give him the title as the Dragon Warrior. Just like that, he goes from a guy who couldn't even watch the show to the main event. But even a title like Dragon Warrior isn't enough to spark an entire story. Poe will need resolve too, especially considering how absolutely nobody wanted to see Oogway pick him. Despite all of their best efforts to kick him to the curb, Poe keeps getting back up and trying again. Between his passion for Kung Fu and his desire to change into someone he can respect, it's safe to say Poe has no shortage of resolve, meaning this idiot is more than meets the eye. As for Miles Morales, the story beats aren't quite as one-to-one as the prior two examples, but the main ideas remain. Like Emmett becoming the Special and Poe becoming the Dragon Warrior, Miles gets thrown into a new world when he is bit by the radioactive spider. This changes his title from Miles the Middle Schooler to Miles the Local Spider-Man, meaning it will only be a matter of time for his natural influence to do its thing, like when Peter Parker entrusts him with the kill switch to the Collider. Had he just been some kid, this story would have stopped here. But thanks to his title, yes, I consider his powers a title in this context, he naturally attracts a story. But as you might have picked up by now, just being entrusted with the kill switch isn't enough to carry the story forward. Miles will need to buy into the mission too. He'll need resolve. From the very start, we saw that Miles has a drive in him. The direction, however, isn't clear. He wants to be himself, but he also wants to make people proud. He's stuck in this weird middle zone of balancing expectations and self-expression. So when he's given this mission to save the entire world, it's like a perfect crossroads for him to fully direct all his potential toward. Meaning, not only does he agree, but he's completely on board. He will fulfill his promise to Peter. So is he an idiot Spider-Man? Yes, but he's a Spider-Man nonetheless. So just like that, by adding some proper influence and resolve, we've turned these three fools into potential heroes. This is the part where we can use that chart I showed off earlier to visualize the character compositions of our three protagonists. As a reminder, this chart is weighted, so it's a relative comparison. With an indomitable drive and a 1,000-year prophecy behind him, I'd say Poe's split is about 55% resolve, 40% influence, and maybe 5% competence. As for Emmett, who is driven by a small crush and is glued to the rebellion's only chance, I pin him here with 30% resolve, 70% influence, and 0% competence. As for Miles, who's got both grit and charm, yet has powers he can't quite control, I'd put him here. 50% resolve, 40% influence, and 10% competence. So according to the chart, we've got three prophets on our hands who have to somehow build competence if they're going to save the world. At first glance, audiences will love these guys because they're all underdogs, easy to root for and fun to watch them grow. Writers, on the other hand, will see these guys and start foaming at the mouth with excitement. The characters might each be idiots in their own respective universes, but that also makes them blank canvases, perfect vessels for narrative change. Sure, they lack competence now, but that's just a clear signal that their story's about acquiring it. Before they do that, though, they'll have to rely on their influence and resolve to help push the story forward, and so each of them do just that. If it wasn't obvious, saving the world will require extreme competence, experience, wisdom, and a general mastery of some specific skill. Apparently to Miles, though, this wasn't obvious. Right off the bat, he tries his luck with like a level 1 Spider-Man challenge and completely destroys the kill switch because our boy is still an idiot. But he's a charismatic and determined idiot. So when Peter B. Parker shows up and is ready to take the story into his own hands, Miles is able to convince him to bring him along and teach him how to be Spider-Man. Emmett Brakowski, however, doesn't have that luxury of naivety. As soon as he gains influence as the Special, the story starts whether he's ready or not. Police close in on him and are prepared to execute him, but thanks to his role as the Chosen One, Master Builder Wildstyle comes to his rescue. FYI, get used to other characters doing heavy lifting in this video, because incompetent heroes need all the help they can get. That help would be allies, mentors, or in Poe's case, mentors. Despite all of the resilience that Poe displayed, Master Shifu was still ready to quit on him. He was convinced the prophecy was wrong and there must have been some mistake. But while Shifu had no respect for Po, he had complete respect for Oogway. So, after some convincing, Oogway was finally able to persuade Shifu to train Po. And just like that, we've set up each of our heroes with the help they so desperately need. For my observant viewers, you might recognize that this mentor step sounds a lot like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Personally, I try to avoid treating story structure like a formula. But I still think this is a point worth noting when we're talking about timeless storytelling. You can't get much more timeless than The Hero's Journey. To go from idiot to expert in a single movie isn't really feasible through traditional training routes, and frankly, I wouldn't want to see it happen that way either. Take a character like Tigress for example. She had been training in Kung Fu since she was a child. Chosen one or not, it wouldn't really be satisfying for Po to surpass her in skill by doing the exact same training, just faster. But that doesn't mean our heroes are hopeless. It just means that the student and the master will have to meet in the middle somewhere, find what Po can do, and work from there. So when Shifu notices Po's food-driven motivation, competence in Kung Fu suddenly looks a lot more possible. By combining two seemingly opposing ideas, which are a panda's desire to eat and martial arts, they expedite his training and create something new altogether. Suddenly, Po might just be competent enough to give them a fighting chance. This meeting in the middle moment isn't just exclusive to Po though. We've established that Emmett and original ideas don't mesh. But what he is good for is following instructions, so when they're preparing to infiltrate Octan Tower, they combine the Master Builder's originality with Emmett's uniformity. Two would-be opposites creating something new, becoming stronger than ever before. This time, the rebellion advances further than it ever had, and it might just be Emmett's newfound competence that's leading the way. How about Miles though? While he's clearly the least competent of the Spider People, Peter B. Parker places his hope in Miles' unique abilities like shock venom and invisibility. Is he anywhere near the other Spider People in competence? No, but by meeting in the middle and leaning into what Miles can do, it redefines what competence can even look like. This meeting in the middle is extremely important when making a timeless story. We don't want to see these characters sacrifice who they are in order to gain the necessary competence, and we don't want them to completely transform into someone they're not. Instead, we want them to synthesize who they already are and who they have to be. As we're going to see soon, this is where narratives truly shine. If it's true that our characters have really built up the necessary competence to win, then, well, they should just go ahead and win already, right? So go on, Emmett, since you're so competent, just plug the Craggle and call it a day. After all, the narrative behind the Lego movie is about following instructions, right? Yeah, if it wasn't obvious, Emmett is still incompetent. And to make matters worse, his mentor Vitruvius informs him that the prophecy that made him the special was actually just made up. So now not only is Emmett incompetent, but the title that gave him influence is gone too. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I want nothing to do with Emmett now. So let's check in on our other two heroes. Wait, why is Miles tied up? He's not ready? But I thought the narrative of Into the Spiderverse was about being different. Well, maybe not quite, because Miles is plenty different, but he still can't use his powers on command. He's still incompetent. But at least Po's still good at Kung Fu, right? It doesn't matter that the Furious Five were no match for Tai Lung, because the narrative behind Kung Fu Panda is about how you just have to be food motivated to win, right? Wait, don't tell me. The Dragon Scroll has been blank this entire time too? So that prophecy was also just a lie, and Po's just a fraud? An incompetent noodle chef in way over his head? Well, our idiot heroes are once again just idiots, back at square one. Has all of this been for naught, or is there some silver lining? I mean, it seems just moments ago they were each basking in the glory of their competence. So how is it that, without any physical changes since then, they've lost every ounce of competence that they've spent all movie gaining? Strange, huh? Well, regardless of wherever that competence went, we can't forget what brought them this far: influence and resolve. As we've seen in all three examples, title as a form of influence can be extremely powerful, especially when that title is the chosen one. But title can also just be family. Being another character's son is enough to naturally invite that character into the story, especially when there's nobody else left for the hero. So with Miles both literally and figuratively trapped, his dad comes to his rescue in a way that he could never expect. He explains to him that no matter what it is that Miles wants in this world, he will be there to support him. In Miles' tug of war between choosing his own path versus not letting people down, his dad casually just bridged the two worlds together in a perfect synthesis. Coincidentally, fatherly advice was just what Po needed too. When he was torn between being honest and being strong, his dad came in with the exact advice he needed to hear. The secret ingredient to his secret ingredient soup is nothing more than belief. Apply that same logic to Po's conflict, and it too bridges the gap and synthesizes the two sides. As for Emmett, he might not have a dad to tell him what he needs to hear, but he does have a Morgan Freeman. I mean a Vitruvius. I mean a dead Vitruvius. Ghost thing. Anyway, made up prophecy or not, Emmett's influence remains. It brings Vitruvius back from the dead to deliver the most important message, basically the exact same one from Kung Fu Panda. To be special, you simply have to believe you're special. In his personal tug of war between being ordinary and being special, Vitruvius helps Emmett close this gap by synthesizing the two ideas into one. Finally, in conjunction with their inherent skills and their learned skills, our heroes have each acquired the last missing piece they needed to truly unlock competence. Having finally reached that glorious 3-trait balance that I've been preaching about this entire video, our heroes are now fully realized and ready to save the day. Through his resolve, Emmett hurls himself out the window and into the abyss. Miles jumps off a building in the name of resolve too. And Poe, he runs up a bunch of stairs. As for competence, Emmett takes a beat straight from the Matrix and has unlocked Master Builder Vision, which he uses to fight back against President Business. Miles has mastered his powers too, which he uses at the perfect time to stop Kingpin. And Poe embraces his unique style of Kung Fu to completely beat down Tai Lung. As for influence, by winning the final fights, they each influence the ultimate changes in their world. Emmett changes the Lego world by showcasing the importance of individuality. Poe changes Kung Fu by proving it's not one size fits all. And while most of the world wasn't even aware that Miles saved it, he helped the Spider People and his father understand the importance of embracing identity. At last, our idiot heroes are just heroes. I hope you can now see exactly why an incompetent hero is a narrative's best friend. In these stories, becoming competent isn't just about training or studying or practicing. These are all external means to an end. Important, yes, but the greatest narratives go beyond that. The most compelling narratives are the ones that can interweave the external and the internal, meaning only when the character changes on the inside can they also change the outside. Only when Miles bridged expectations with self-expression could he harness his powers. Only when Poe bridged his inherent panda traits with self-confidence could he master Kung Fu. And only when Emmett bridged his insignificance with significance could he master building. By having such an obvious flaw be portrayed by incompetence, writers can tell a narrative of how to fix that flaw and grant competence as a reward. So I think this is the last protagonist video I'm going to make for a while now. While I think the chart is a great tool, it's definitely not perfect, and I don't think it's exhaustive in the way I was hoping it would be. In the meantime, I've been considering doing maybe deep dives or candid reviews on single movies and series. So if that's something that might interest you, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, maybe subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. As always, thanks for watching.